Hour, probably are. Hi there, everybody, and welcome to the Tatiana Show. It is April 5th. Not once, but twice this week, you've been exposed to the glorious crypto space. We've been flirting with the music part, too, which has been really fun. And today, Josh, we have a special guest. I'm glad you could join us because I was saying to you off the air that perhaps you can help me understand some of the more finer points of the scientific mind of Kevin McKernan. Kevin, welcome to the show today.
Thank you. Thank you. Hopefully I don't need an interpreter. I'll do my best.
Okay, good. So I'm really excited that you're, joining us today. I'm going to the CannaMed. Okay. No, because there was CannaSense earlier I was thinking about, and then and I got confused. So I'm going to the CannaMed conference this weekend up at Harvard. And I'm going with Lynn Ulbricht, who's going to be talking about, the effects of the drug war and that kind of thing. And I'm going to be singing. And I think it's going to be really exciting because people have been talking about medical cannabis for a long time. You've been working at the heart of it. Maybe for people who are not familiar with you and what kind of work you do and stuff, maybe back it up and give me a little overview.
Okay, so we do a lot of work in personalized medicine. We try to sequence patients that have what we call idiosyncratic disease, where you don't know what they have. You suspect they may have symptoms of ASD, autism spectrum disorder, or epilepsy, or mitochondrial disease, and physicians order tests for us to sequence their genome and see if we can improve therapy. That's done on. Can you hear me? Yeah. Yes.
Yep.
What is a genome?
Oh, all right. I'm sorry. I'm speaking drive again. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm like, halt
there. So genome, every one of your cells has a genome, and oftentimes your genome can elucidate which molecular pathway might be broken that's driving disease. So that can be very helpful for physicians so they can end these like diagnostic odysseys where you hop from one specialist to another. This is important because healthcare is actually set up and based on silos from organ systems that date back to teaching people anatomy, right? So you have cardiologists, you have neurologists, you have nephrologists, but they all use DNA. It's the same genome, but the diseases sometimes bounce around different organs, not really caring which silo of the health department you're in. And this is what really makes cost ricochet to extraordinary levels, because you get first going to a neurologist, then they send you to a cardiologist, and they send you to a GI specialist. Your genome doesn't care about your organs. It just has broken pathways, and you can sometimes find that from sequencing the DNA.
Wonderful. How long does it take to sequence someone's genome?
Nowadays, you could actually do it in 48 hours, but the process of getting it done involves a lot of other things like getting insurance cards and getting genetic counselors involved. And so it's usually more like a 4-week turnaround time. So maybe 48 hours on the actual sequencers themselves.
Wow, 48 hours. Are you only sequencing a small portion of someone's DNA where you know where to look? Or
we are at the moment, and that's not due to technological reasons, that's due to more ethical reasons. So we can sequence the whole genome. However, that's kind of like doing whole body MRI scans, and you can create a lot of false positives if you do that. The insurance providers prefer you focus on just the coding content of the genome, which is about 1% of it, which is where all the genes are. And so that's what we do. We just sequence what's known as the exome, which is the coding content of the genome.
Are the insurance companies the ones that should be making that decision?
Nope, but they are.
Okay.
So, there's a long story there, and it could consume a whole podcast, but it'll probably bore the hell out of your listeners. But basically, there's an oligopoly there, and there shouldn't be. And one nasty side effect of what's going on in the healthcare industry is that everyone's deductibles are going up. The bright side of that pain is that there's now a cash market where there's real pricing signals, and we'll actually get some sanity in the healthcare system when people start having to treat it not like changing your oil, but as actual insurance for catastrophic effects. That's what is better for any market, is that there's actually a direct relationship with the customer, not a third or fourth party that's weighing in on what you should do.
Okay. Do you only work with marijuana?
No. In fact, it was very rare that we would actually end up going that direction with any type of sequencing we did in the human genome. It would usually point to something else. But more and more in the last 5 years, since we were involved in epilepsy, that's the number one question everyone has in epilepsy is my child going to respond to CBD? Cannabidiol is a compound out of the marijuana plant that is showing a lot of promise in epilepsy. And of course, it's spilling over.
So CBD, for everyone, is so there's THC, as far as I know. There's THC, which gets you nice and high. And then there's CBDs, which were slowly taken out of grass over the years to focus on the high because everyone used it for
That's
the high. And now being legal, because it's legal, people are actually seeing the benefits of everything that they've been growing out of the plant for a long time.
Yes, you're showing your cards. You know a lot about THC. Yeah, that's
way to go, Josh.
That's great. So prohibition has done that. The natural state of the plant is to make half CBD, half THC. That's what we would call the heterozygous state of the plant. And what happened with prohibition is everyone bred it in the direction of making all THC and no CBD. The two compounds are made by two enzymes that compete for the same precursor. So if it's making a lot of the other, it's making a lot of THC, it's not making a lot of CBD. It's all been bred for the psychoactive effect. And CBD is not psychoactive based on our stereotypes of psychoactivity. People will challenge that. It is a very potent anxiolytic, so it gets rid of anxiety. So some would argue maybe that is psychoactive, but it's not classified as psychoactive like THC. The DEA still doesn't like it, but it has profound effects on kids with epilepsy.
So, because this is the big question that always pops up, people, and this is, I guess the last pillar of people not wanting to legalize it is they say, well, most people, they get these medical cards, but they don't really need it. Is there any truth in the medical side? This has always been the pillar of prohibition. And, to me, it's obvious that it's showing proof, but and you're deep inside the science of it. So it's great to have you on the show.
So you do get the stereotype of back pain complaint. That is a subjective form of pain. And the reality is it does work for that. It's a much safer and better painkiller than any of the opiates that are out there. And we have an opiate epidemic right now of, I don't know what the numbers are up to, but I think there are over 40 deaths a day with opiate abuse. And much of that is driven off of FDA-approved opiates. 80% of the heroin addicts start on something like Oxy. So it does work for pain. It's much less dangerous to use for pain. And I don't think there's any reason we should be afraid of it, just given its therapeutic index. It is a very tolerant drug in terms of toxicity. You can't say that about aspirin or ibuprofen or any of the other over-the-counter painkillers that are out there. The real, I think, kicker in this is people have a hang-up of people getting high. And if it happens to be a painkiller, well, we should get over that. The people getting high issue is probably directly tied to people confused over the fact that they believe if you're high, driving accidents will go up, and that's not been shown to be the case. It's shown to be, in fact, go down. Not compared to sober drivers, but compared to whether you're drinking or whether you're on cannabis, you're less likely to get in a car wreck on cannabis than alcohol. And you tend to drive slower. There's a host of social effects that this is a far better intoxicant for recreational use than alcohol, hands down.
Yeah, actually, I read a study on that when someone drives freshly stoned, like they never smoke, then they're more likely to drive worse. But if you are always driving stoned and used to it, you drive with the same ability. Like there's no less.
Yeah, there has been some. So Mark Anderson did some good work on this. There has been some signs in simulators of less peripheral vision, but they tend to drive 9 miles an hour slower. And that's everything with velocity squared, right? Energy. Your velocity is a squared function with energy, and if you're driving slower, you're driving safer in terms of any impact of the vehicle. The other flip side of this is it's very we're involved in personalized medicine, so we always like to caveat statements about averages. The means when it comes down to this, yes, the average driver has those effects. However, there have been studies showing people with ADHD are better drivers on cannabis. All right, so you have to remember there's some folks that have neurochemistry that implies they're a little bit offset from normal, and oftentimes drugs are used to get them back to baseline. And we need to be aware of that with cannabis, just as we would with any other methylphenidate or amphetamine we may give them. And those are small studies with ADHD, and they're small studies because it's very difficult to do those studies, but they're promising nonetheless, and they're reminders that we need to take all of these anecdotes with the concept that everyone's wired a little bit differently.
So what's going on with this conference exactly? Like, who can people expect to have there? How long has it been going on for? What is the focus? Tell us a little bit more about that.
So this is our second year doing the conference, and it's the theme of it is personalized medicine. That's kind of our hobby horse here. Is we sequence about 700 patients a month, so we really understand this, that everyone is wired differently, their genetics respond differently. It's actually quite libertarian if you think about it. We want medicine to be dialed for the individual. We do not want herd medicine. Herd medicine is kind of what we've gotten with centralization, what we've gotten with federal control over the FDA, and it doesn't deliver the right result for the right patient. So personalized medicine is where it's at, and we believe that the most promising pharmaceuticals out there are actually coming out of the cannabis plant. And if we can tie those two together, we can heal a tremendous number of people. So the conference is focusing on that. How do we extract the most knowledge out of the plant? Because it's not just about THC or CBD. There are pharmacologically active terpenes in the plant that are known to hit the cannabinoid receptors as well. We'll explain those in a bit. I know that's throwing some jive around, but the terpenes we've got to keep our eye on. They are generally recognized as safe. That's a grass term that they throw around at the FDA. But these are things that are in a lot of other fruits and vegetables as well. You may be familiar with beta-caryophyllene from peppers. You may be familiar with limonene from lemons. These things are in high concentrations in the plants, and we know they're pharmaceutically active as well. And right now, any given plant you get out of a dispensary is kind of a potpourri of all of these things, and we're not tracking it very well. And so this is why people have very polymorphic responses to different cannabis strains. It's because they're extraordinarily diverse species, and their expression patterns are extremely complicated. So this conference is meant to dial into the personalized medicine the patients are seeing and to dial in the personalized nature of these plants and see if we can build the bridge between the two.
So a lot of these growers, though, are cloning plants, right? They're grabbing a single mother plant and everything's... Is that the way forward for making sure that someone gets the same medicine every time, that they just clone the thing?
Yeah, it's possible. That's one manufacturing approach to it. However, like cloning Dolly the lamb, the health of the organism decays the more times you clone it, right? The telomeres shrink and mitochondria decay, and so you end up with things that end up losing vigor. They're more pest resistant, or they're less pest resistant. And then you kind of paint yourself in a corner with pesticides, and then these pesticides, unfortunately, are getting enriched in a lot of the cannabinoid extractions. So I wouldn't say that's the holy grail of getting the strains right. A lot of people want to go back to seeds and get very healthy vigor so they get strong growth in the grows, and then just categorize them genetically so that they know, okay, this is a sibling of what we used to use, and we know this one's going to express THC and terpenoline, for example. And that can be done now. We have the tools that can actually genetically track these things and know whether they're truly a strain you've seen before or something completely novel.
You mentioned that there were going to be football players at the conference, and I thought that was kind of strange. You know, I expected sort of doctor types and whatnot,
Yes.
maybe some students, but you're having football players. Can you go into why that is and how that kind of arose?
Sure. So football players are like... they sometimes get seizures. This is how we got into that field. Since we're experts in epilepsy, many of the football players later in life start getting seizures. And it's an artifact of them getting a lot of head trauma known as chronic traumatic encephalopathy. It's a rapid decline of mental state. They often get dementia and sometimes get very violent and commit suicide. It's a very treacherous disease, and many of the football players are seeing what their statesmen or elder football players are going through right now and are panicking that that's coming their way. Opiates exacerbate this problem. Alcohol exacerbates this problem. These are the two things the NFL actually seems to promote. You look at any single NFL advertisement and you're going to see Budweiser, boner pills, and who knows what else. That's all you see on football. The football players actually want to be able to use cannabinoids to help with this brain disease because it's a neuroprotectant. Arguably, you cannot put a bigger helmet on these people. You need to put the helmet in the brain, and you need antioxidants in the brain to protect you from stroke-like effects or from head trauma on the field. And it's a painkiller. They're loading these people up on opiates going onto the field. This is only going to exacerbate the problem with people hitting people harder and getting more trauma out there. So the NFL players are on board. They want to move cannabis to be legal within the NFL, given the number of states that are not legal. And they want to have that option to not have to get addicted to opiates. And the NFL organization itself is hopefully going to bend on this soon.
So that's actually, I had referenced that was like that movie that Will Smith was in, and it was called Concussion or something like that. It was actually a very good movie, I thought. Have you seen a lot of resistance? How long is this idea of using medical marijuana in I guess even in sports in general? Like, how long has that been going on for? And what have they said about that? You know, what's the excuse for prescribing all these opioids? Obviously it's because they want them to keep playing, but it's bad for them because they're getting addicted and then they end up dying, and they have no sense of what's hurting them, I would think.
That's right. Yeah. So I don't know when it all started, but we've seen it in the MMA. There have been players in the MMA that have come out saying they've been smoking CBD pens right on TV and just being blatant about it, that they want the rules changed. I would imagine it's going to play a role in the NHL as well. I think where it really became a precipice with that Will Smith movie is one of them, but also when you started seeing football players commit suicide. This has some overlap with PTSD. When they have this much head trauma, they share some symptomatology with PTSD, and those patients we've seen with veterans, they're committing suicide 22 a day. Again, a group of people fighting for freedom, as they say, can't actually have it when they get back. And that has been a real tragedy. And you can see the centralization of what we're doing there isn't helping either. Sue Sisley is a great researcher in this field, has been trying to get clinical trials through for 6 years on that topic, and it's getting roadblock
6 years.
Roadblock after roadblock from either the DEA, the FDA, or now they're to the point where they need to get the cannabis only from the government down at UMass, and it's loaded with mold, and it doesn't have a high amount of CBD in it. So the wonderful thing that is happening in the field is we are starting to see a little bit of a laboratory democracy out there, where you're seeing state rights take over. It's just difficult to get state rights for medical research.
What about internationally? So is there a difference between?
Just about to say that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Australia, there's an institute. Ian McGregor down in Australia just got a $40 million private donation to start a research center down in Australia. So I believe Tilray is actually running a cancer-based trial down there for nausea and pain and cancer. So that's moving ahead. Wow. We're seeing stuff in Israel. There's a few folks from Israel coming to the conference, and they're looking at it for autism and for bone breaks. It does help heal bones faster. Another thing that may play a role in the NFL.
Is this just CBD?
CBD is very good for bone health, yes. So it's not always a CBD thing, though. It's occasionally you need THC. Like when you look at the work on Alzheimer's, THC is playing a role. It's probably one of the most promising Alzheimer's drugs right now is THC, and that's
really.
Yeah, isn't it ironic, right?
God, I feel like I'm gonna hook up my grandma now.
Yeah.
And just see what happens. And when I get back, I'll be like, Bakcha, try this. She doesn't have Alzheimer's, but she doesn't remember some things sometimes. I don't know. I'm kind of kidding, but
yeah. Well, with THC, there are some side effects that we want to track down. I mean, it's not a panacea. Some anxiety with it, and that we believe is genetic. We're still trying to hunt that down. We're going to present on some variants at CanMed that relate to migraine and anxiety. We've actually scanned through all the patients that we sequenced, and when you have a large, probably 7,000 patients that are in that study, and we just scan them all for variants that might be associated with anxiety, and out popped mutations in the cannabinoid 1 receptor. So there's probably a genetic susceptibility to that, where some people freak out in THC, and it's not everyone, but it's probably around 10% of the population. So it's by no means run home and give it to grandma instantly. There may be something there. Very low dosages may help with it that aren't even psychoactive that they're beginning to find. So the touch points in medicine are enormous, and people often disregard this because they see studies of it touching so many systems. They believe it's all conspiracy. But there's a good biological underpinning to it, and it has to do with the fact that these receptors they hit are the most ubiquitous receptors we have in our body, and they're illegal. Is there
the similar sort of benefits from alcohol, for instance?
No.
Just out of interest, from taking the spirit of any sort of plant and distilling it down, can you use that in any way, or is it just nothing?
I'm sorry, from an alcohol extraction from the plant, or are you speaking of?
Yeah,
okay, I thought you were talking about beer or wine.
No, like using alcohol from from certain plants to have medicinal even in tiny portions where you wouldn't
Yes.
feel it. I don't know.
Okay, so that's a question of chemistry, and yes, an alcohol extraction on the plant will pull out the cannabinoids and the terpenes. And this, in fact, what a lot of people do in the cannabis space is they make extract organic solvents like ethanol. Butane, we don't recommend. You can blow yourself up using butane. But isopropanol, ethanol, hexane, and CO2 extractions are quite common to get those medicinal compounds out, to get them at higher concentrations. So you don't have to necessarily smoke raw plant matter. You can put them on your tongue or in your mouth, and they'll absorb through your oral mucosa, and you'll get proper dosing. So those are quite popular now.
So
Wow.
I just wanted to go back to something you said earlier, that when cloning a plant, you lose, for instance, in the telomeres shrink, and is this causing your field to study how we can grow, keep telomeres from shrinking? I mean, that seems like an amazing thing.
Yeah, so
because that is sort of the ground of aging, right?
You are, and you're nailing on a really important point with David Sinclair does a lot of studies on sort of the molecular clocks and the sirtuins and the whole aging process. And it does come back to some telomere length and perhaps mitochondrial genetics that go on there. And there are plants out there that arguably don't have this artifact. It's probably genetic. Like you can clone them for 30 years and they don't seem to have decay. And they're probably it's the analogy of like centenarians we might have in humans that live, over 100 years. There's probably some genetic susceptibility or genetic genes in there that they have really good telomerase enzymes or something. They've got really good DNA repair enzymes. And so those people tend to not get cancer and live a very long time. Some of that is clearly seen with some of the clones out there. But the vast majority of them seem to have a pretty rapid decay rate, and they're more prone to hermaphrodite when you do this. The hermaphroditic process is when you stress these plants, they have amazing capability to switch sexes on you so that they can pollinate in the advantage of that environment. So I think the reason cloning came about is an economic one. People began cloning because popping seeds means 45% of your plants end up being male, and you don't want the males around. That's half your grow getting wasted with plants that don't produce flowers. And so you can't figure out if they're male or female until like 6 or 8 weeks out. And so you're putting all that nutrient and lights into a system that you don't get any return for. That's all changed now with genetics. Let me show you this. We have little devices about this big now. This is a little PCR station that plugs into the USB port of the computer. And you can see here, this is a XY test. So anything in there that's pink, I don't know if you can see that in the background there.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, so the pink wells there, those are females, and the yellow ones are males. So we can do a hole punch from a plant the moment the leaf pops up and scan it for a Y chromosome and something that just changes color on a USB port for $5 or $10 depending on the volume of it. So these
amazing.
Can go point of grow, and you don't have to ship anything around state lines. You just pop this in your grow and you can screen your plants. And so now people are making this motion back to, okay, let's go healthy and pop seeds and screen the seeds in the first week and get really vibrant plants that we can genetically profile later once we know they're all female. So
that's great. Wow.
Yeah, that's going to change things, I think, quite a bit, and we'll get better yield, and we won't have to suffer with these infestations, perhaps of powdery mildew and other things that hit grows that are all clone based. The other issue you have with clones, you got to remember, it's like having monocultures, right? Imagine a world of Monsanto where everything's the same crop. In comes an infestation of some sort, it wipes out everything. Right, so you really don't want a room full of genetically identical things, because you're going to have an immunity problem if something gets in there and starts to affect it. You really want siblings and some diversity in there so that you're not prone to monoculture issues that might arise when you push everything into one genetic line.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
So this is all quite interesting. What about people that want to come to the conference? Can anybody come to this? What's the policy for that?
So the conference has a couple registration fees. There's a few different tiers. There are folks who are in the medical community trying to get continuing medical education credits. There are CME credits there, and those are probably the top tier, most expensive tickets. And then there are, I think, social memberships or something that are down in the couple $100 range. I think those might all be sold out. However, I think it's now we're over. I think we're over the 420 number, which was the occupancy there. So we're probably pulling employees out now to let new people in, which is going to be the game between now and Saturday.
Wow. Well, are they going to be videotaping it and sharing any of this stuff in case, I don't know, I feel bad for all the people who are watching and are all intrigued, and then they'll just have to never find out anything.
Yeah, no, it is. It is going to be webcast, and there is a live webcast you can sign up for, and I think it's all going to go live like 3 months later once we get all the consents from everybody involved. If some of the speakers have presentations that have to get, they can't just go live instantly due to some of the data that's there. But the intent is they will all be live eventually, and there is a webcast you can sign up for them on. It's on the registration site that will be going live during the conference. So it's kind of like a concert, right? You can get your live thing there, but if you don't really care about being there live, you'll see it a few months later.
Awesome. I like it. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to going up there, and I know Lynn's going to do a good job. She's got a talk prepared, and I don't know, anytime she speaks, everybody really likes it. Have you ever seen her speak anywhere?
I have. And so, and I think her topic's very important because the cannabis field right now is wrestling with this whole legalization process and regulation. They tend to kind of recite this mantra of we need to tax and regulate, and I don't think they quite recognize that they're using that word wrongly, incorrectly. We're really going through is deregulation. The worst form of regulation is absolute prohibition. And so this is really a tax and deregulate move. And you have to be careful not begging for too much regulation, or you'll be right back to where we are with the FDA and the DEA, which is one size fits all regulation, which isn't working for us. So I like Lynn's story because it's an honest reminder of what happens when you overregulate. You end up with adverse consequences in a judicial system that's quite brute force and doesn't really have a mechanism to reverse. And so every regulation we consider, we've got to have a reminder that there's going to be some 30-year-old entrepreneur that gets locked in a cage as an adverse effect of these regulations. And so we have to be very mindful of the fact that they're going to be implemented with a very blunt instrument. And so we should be prudent on what we put down on paper.
Right. I think, unfortunately, that seems to be, the main way that they do things is just these. But another thing is that people were using the Silk Road for medical reasons. It wasn't just because they wanted to get, their batch of heroin or something. They were actually trading medicine on there as well. And because of regulations and because of, these sort of black markets, it kind of complicates it. And the Silk Road made it a lot safer. So you could actually tell, through the rating system what exactly you were getting. And it saved a lot of lives, I think.
Yeah, and that's what turned me onto it, is that I heard about his story, and I have to confess that I spent not enough time reading through the news when some of those allegations came against him for murder for hire, and I just kind of wrote him off as, power corrupts, and those turned out to be fabricated, and I felt like a fool later. But we deal with patients that are struggling with this. We deal with patients that need access to CBD. You can't exactly take a 5-year-old kid with Dravet syndrome, put him on a plane and go to high altitude in Colorado and expect there not to be seizures on the way. This is very dangerous to move them on meds. And so I wouldn't be surprised if some parents were resorting to this. And one of the reasons we started this Cannapedia project was to help some of these patients sort out whether they're getting the same meds. This really came out of some interactions we have with Seattle Children's. We're doing a lot of sequencing with Seattle Children's. A physician out there who's really, really dialed into this is Dr. Sinedo. And he came to us saying, look, all my kids are on this thing called ACDC. Can you help me figure out what it is? I mean, it looks different every time they come in the door with it. Is there a way you can genotype it? And so we started doing that. We started getting DNA from those samples and building a website that has all the CBD-rich strains out there and the genetics of them. So now parents could arguably get a new batch. If they can find a local lab to get DNA out of it, we'll sequence it and tell them, all right, you've got ACDC this time. It's the same thing. Or no, it looks like it shifted a little bit, and you might want to get this retested to check for the terpene and the cannabinoid profiles just to be sure. And so that DNA database exists because DNA can go across state lines and products can't. You can't ship your oils across state lines to get them tested. You have to really find a local lab to do that. But the DNA seems to travel quite freely according to the federal laws. And so we can tie a lot of this information together with a nice distributed database of the cannabis genetics. And we've been doing all that with blockchain work.
I have one last question as well. In terms of, you bring up blockchain here, and in the Bitcoin space, of course, we're all very very open source friendly. And I always think when you get to genetics and you start, especially in legalized genetics, where companies start actually patenting certain strains,
Right.
Do you see that as a threat to the research, or something
Yes.
that would help the research?
So this is a very deep wormhole that probably needs Stephen Kinsella in it to straight it all out. So yeah, the intellectual property stuff is complicated and it's a mess. So if you go back to the Human Genome Project, I worked on that for 4 years and was a little bit disappointed in the fact that the taxpayer-funded Human Genome Project ended up with a tremendous number of patents on the human genome. So there's probably 20% of the genes were patented. Some of that law has changed since then, where the patent law doesn't have much teeth in the gene patents, but people are still patenting cannabis strains now. In 2011, I actually put a sequence of ChemDog public to try to avoid this from happening again by just blasting one genome that was a high THC strain and throwing it public as quickly as we could. Arguably, that may have saved people from trying to patent high THC strains. They have managed to get some CBD THC strains patented recently, and some high limonene strains have been patented recently. So I don't know how all it's going to play out. I do understand some biotech companies have to file patents to get funding, and there's, I don't always attack the player of the game, but the game itself when I see people do that, because I've been in those shoes before. But the defensive IP, I actually think, is the best money spent. And when you look at what happens in a modern economy that moves as quickly as we move, your patents usually don't issue until they're meaningless. It can take 3 years for these things to issue. And by then you've moved on to something else. You've spent all this money on attorney fees to basically push something into the patented domain, and you may be off of it by the time it issues. I think Elon Musk and others are recognizing it may be better just to take that money and put it right back into fast iterative design on your next product than to necessarily spend it all in court. So I think what we're seeing with Cannapedia is people are playing a defensive game. They're getting their stuff sequenced and put on the blockchain and public, so they have a prior use exemption to anything that submarines them in the future. If a patent emerges a year from now about a strain that happens to look like theirs is public, they can go and run an interference process with the USPTO, or they can claim, look, I've been using this in a business setting for a year before your patent emerged, and I'm exempt.
Yeah, I love that about the blockchain. Like, for folks who don't know, the thing about patenting something is that you have to basically go to the patent office, pull down your pants, and show everything, and then anybody, the government can basically go either no, that's now
obvious,
confidential or secret, or they can block it, or they can do whatever. And with the blockchain, you can basically just hash your invention, stick it in there, and timestamp it, and then when something comes up, you say, no, look, I've been using it. Here's the hash, and since X time, and it's a fantastic way of getting around all that nonsense of centralized accreditation for invention.
Yeah, so there's 420 is the right number, right? But it's over 400 strains we've got now hashed into the blockchain. But to make that actually work, you have to have the sequence public. Which many people aren't adverse to. And if you just have the hash and show up, the USPTO will say, well, you didn't put the actual sequence public, so it really isn't prior art. You kept it private. So we're putting the sequence public and the hash. The hash is really the timestamp that won't go away. And that's important in case our database goes down, or someone questions our timestamps, or we have to reboot the database, or we get acquired. I mean, you want the customer to have a timestamp in the database that's that's bomb-proof, and no company is. Yeah. So we're using it. It's very simple. That's all we're using it for. It's nothing sexy for moving money around. It's just for, hey, we want timestamps that no one will question, and we'll put the sequence on Amazon. It's
beautiful. It's beautiful, Tatiana. Isn't that beautiful?
I like it. I'm excited. I'm going to learn something. CannaMed at Harvard. Me and Lynn feel a little bit like Legally Blonde. We're going to Harvard, kind of. I don't know if you guys know the reference, but hopefully some other people do, because it is funny. But anyway, thanks so much, Kevin, for joining us. Do you want to give us a website where people can kind of like find out more and get in touch with you and stuff like that? What's your contact info?
Certainly. So go to can.courtagen.com. It's gonna bring you.
How do you spell Courtagen?
So first off, can is with a K for a trademark reason. KANN.courtagen.com. COURTAGEN.com.
Excellent.
And if you go to that site, you'll find a phyllo tree. You probably want a Chrome browser to get the real fun out of it, but that'll show you a couple hundred strains that you can kind of surf around and see which ones are really genetically close and clones and which ones are really distant. And that a lot of that stuff is actually etched into the blockchain.
Awesome. All right. Well, this has been exciting. I look forward to bringing back all my knowledge and telling people on the show next time. And thanks so much. I'll see you next week.
Good stuff. Take care, folks.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye. See you later, Kevin.
Pleasure
Take care.
to meet you, Kevin. Nice.
Cheers.
Cool.
Indeed. I'll be listening. You guys have a great show. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Hey, Josh. So are you
Tatiana.
just hanging with
Wasn't
us?
that good?
What?
Yeah, look, yeah, I'll hang for another 20 minutes.
Good attitude.
I've got to get.
Yeah, and well, Justin
Yeah.
will be a good guest. I'm excited. We had Justin on the IP episode, and I wanted to have him on because, I put out my album, Keep the Faith, on March 31st. That was just last week. And if people want to check it out, they can get it on my website. And I continue to have some struggles as an artist. I forgot how much the music industry was like the worst place on earth. And so, I was kind of processing through that. I talked to Justin, and he has all sorts of insight. I don't know what his official title is at SonicScoop, but people will probably have seen their stories on my feed. I support what they're doing. I think it's great. So without further ado, let's have further ado. Oh, he's the director of content and publishing, Justin Colletti. Before we bring on Justin, though, let's say thanks to the BitcoinCPA.com and CryptoCompare.com, two of our sponsors. We're not going to talk about them for too long because we're going over time. But thanks to you guys. Mwah, mwah. Let's bring on Justin.
Yeah, they're really good services.
Awesome.
Bring on Justin. There he is.
Hey, Justin, what's going on? He's muted still.
Mute myself.
Okay, there we go.
Oh.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. Great to be back on. How are you doing?
Very happy to have you. Did you like that episode that we did? I saw that you were digging it in the chat.
I did. It's fascinating stuff. I'm not a partaker myself, but I do like to see people working towards, let's just say, giving that substance its due, because it should be out there. People should be experimenting with it. Whether or not, I like the point that you brought up, Joshua, where you said, people get into this idea of the ID cards and whether they can be used for nefarious purposes. And it's just a question we need to remove completely so people can actually investigate this stuff to the extent that it really needs to be investigated. I mean, it can really help people. And if people are using it in a way that it doesn't help them, that's kind of their problem. I think that's
exactly. And the parents should be teaching them how to, deal with actual life, because a lot of these people are escaping because of some sort of trauma or something that's happened in their life that we need to deal with. It's the same with alcoholism or anything else. You have to deal with issues instead of, But anyway.
Let's talk about some music,
the music
Justin.
industry.
Tell for people who missed the IP Bonanza, which was, I feel like we still didn't get to the bottom of it. I want to bring on Kinsella next time. He had a knip on me on Facebook. He was like, what the hell? You're not libertarian enough because of your IP views. So I actually want to hear what he has to say. I'm open to being convinced. But Justin, for those people who don't know you, maybe a little bit of background about how you have come to the music world.
Sure. Well, I mean, I've been involved in music as long as I can remember. I come from a family where, music was played and all of that. And my father was he was a school teacher, but who taught piano lessons on the side and was always really into music. And at one point, he got himself a cassette 4-track. And of course, he could never even figure out how to program the VCR, so he never figured out how to do the cassette 4-track. So I kind of ended up, grabbing it when I was 12 or 13 years old. And I had the cassette 4-track and 2 microphones and just recorded the bands that I was in with my friends. So we'd have the one microphone that we would put on the drum kit, and you try to put it just in the right place so you get a decent balance, and then you take the 3 or 4 guitar amps and put it around the other microphone and adjust their levels until you have a decent balance, and then you still have 2 tracks. So that was pretty incredible. And then so you'd have 2 more tracks so you could do some vocals, but then if you want to get really crazy, you could bounce the 3 tracks to the additional track, and now you have 3 more tracks. And that's where I got into it from. From there, I graduated to 8-track reel-to-reel. And then around the time that people were supposed to go to college was around the time that Pro Tools was kind of starting to become a more affordable option for people. So I moved to Pro Tools, probably I guess 17 years ago-ish at this point, and really haven't looked back. And I mean, I still do occasional things on tape, but I've just always been in it. But on the business side, I hope you don't mind if I ran slightly longer, because hopefully this will just give you some context on just where I come from on the business side. Having worked with just countless artists, a lot of artists towards the beginning of their career, I noticed that a lot of them didn't do much, didn't stay in the industry for any long period of time, didn't have any significant sustainable financial success. And then I worked with some who did. And I want to figure out what separated the ones who kept at it and developed sustainable careers from the ones that didn't, so I could give better advice to the people I was working with. And in writing for SonicScoop, I also started interviewing some of my favorite producers, engineers, and artists. And that kept on being a constant question, because I was working with musicians, and they all asked, so what do we do next after this whole recording process? How do we make this a sustainable thing? And I wanted to know what to tell them. I wanted to know for myself. So it's been kind of a mission of mine, I would say, especially since I started writing for SonicScoop about 7 years ago, to really try to get under the hood of this stuff and understand how the business side of it works. And I guess to a degree that has worked, because the business lessons that I've learned from music, I've applied to our own business, SonicScoop, and I think we grew revenues 200% last year. We grew readership, something like 500% in the first couple of years I was on. And it really came from applying the very same lessons that I was trying to teach musicians to our own business, practicing what you preach. So I'm just very confident that if you understand the principles of business and apply them, you can do more than you'd imagine. So that's my pitch.
Well, I know we're currently in Techstars accelerator program. I know they've got a music accelerator program as well. I think that it would be a similar thing, right? You're taking the concepts of business and actually applying it to artists. And an artist friend of mine, she's not a musician, but she's a painter and sculptor and stuff. And she went and did, I think it was like 4 years of art college or school, and did a degree. And she told me they did, I think it was 3 days of marketing in that whole time. And like, you what? So it was just ridiculous, because for me, marketing is probably number one. If you want to be an artist, you can throw paint around and do whatever you want, but at the end of the day, you need to eat. And so you need to sell this stuff and make a name for yourself. Yeah. And I see far too few artists actually taking it serious as a business.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that, as the resident artist here, designated artist, I think that, you can still do everything and still not make much headway, because I think that the industry is sort of stacked against people. Number one, artists have this perception of, I'm going to get a record deal, I'm going to be on the cover of Rolling Stone, and then I'm going to hang out with all the famous people, and then it's going to be awesome. And it's just this completely like this, dream world of what success is in the music industry. And sometimes success in the music industry is just, being able to pay your bills and have a little bit of money extra so you can go on vacation. That success is defined differently. But, we just put out my record on Friday, and I had a huge list of different people that I was supposed to get reviews for. And, my PR company said, hey, you need to get music reviews. So I said, okay, I'm going to go and look for music reviews. And what I realized was how impossible it was to get music reviews. And then furthermore, when I spoke with other kinds of music PR people, they told me that music reviews are totally not even effective, that a lot of publications aren't even using them anymore because people aren't using them. And so it's sort of like this fruitless thing. But in your mind, you think, okay, I need to be on the radio. Well, if you want to be on the radio, I hope you've got really deep pockets. And I think it could be very disheartening, because, I went to Berkeley. I'm a smart girl. I have a natural inclination toward business, and I still find it to be like beating your head against the wall. I'd rather build a coin and innovate in a completely different field. I think that's more fruitful than the music industry, that I think can just be very, very closed off. What's been your experience, Justin?
Yeah, it's tricky. I can really sympathize with a lot of that. I would say that the music industry has gone through a period where there has been a significant decline. So I do not want to paint a super glum picture, because I think even within that decline, which you can measure, there are still an incredible number of opportunities, but we do have to start by being realistic about the decline and where it is. So if you look at a chart of recorded music sales over time, and you fix it for inflation and population growth, you will find that there was a big peak right about the mid to late 1970s where record sales were huge. And then the tape cassette came along, and people joke, oh, they thought tape cassette was going to kill the record industry. But if you actually look at a chart of music sales adjusted for inflation and population growth, you find that as soon as cassettes come, you get to about 1976, 1977, around there, you're peaking. And then right in the early 80s, music sales crash when you adjust them for population growth and inflation. The same thing happens in the CD era. In the CD era,
but why? Because people started making tapes and copying them, or what?
Yeah, that's pretty much the argument. Until CDs came along, which were uncopyable. I mean, if I can share my screen, I can pull up a great chart for you guys if you want to see it. I recommend there's an article on Business Insider, which has the best chart of this that I've seen. I think it's current as of 2013, 2014, but it's called The Real Death of the Music Industry. If you search The Real Death of the Music Industry, Business Insider, open that up in another tab, you can see those charts for yourself and what really happens to revenue. The same thing happens going up to the year 2000. There's a big peak. There's this CD sales boom that right around 1999, 2000 drops off significantly. And you do see music sales dropping by something like 40 to 60% when you adjust them for inflation and population growth. And I've done
as Napster came in.
Correct, yes. And I've done articles that trace the amount of musicians working professionally as counted by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And they did decrease in that same period. You can make an argument for anywhere from a 10% to a 40% decrease in the number of working musicians after that period and through the Great Recession. So that's
what I'd like to see.
But
what I'd like to see though is what are the charts and what are the statistics of album sales going down, but ticket sales for live concerts? What did they do in that same time period? Because I might be getting this music for free, but I'm also being exposed to new music who I'd never have heard of, because I'm not going to buy an album who I've never heard of, apart from on the radio. So radios had this massive monopoly on and control of musicians, and who were the special artists of the year to get through this firewall.
Yeah.
And so that we had this explosion of allowing people to share and move music around. But of course, to the detriment of CD sales or sales of the actual content. But yeah, ticket sales, I could imagine, might have gone up.
That's a great point. And I will say that as far as gross receipts, ticket prices really did go up. We actually talked about this a little bit in the IP show, where back in the 1970s, artists often sold albums as loss leaders. They didn't necessarily care if they made, they often sold, let me start that again. The 1970s, artists often sold concerts as loss leaders. They didn't care if they made a lot of money on the concerts, because they knew they'd be able to sell this high value product called the vinyl record that people were excited to have, and they'd make their margin there. And today it has reversed. Those artists who are losing money, and they don't care if they lose money on their albums, are getting it up in other ways. And one of the biggest is ticket sales. And one of the big trends, especially with major artists, is the price of their premium ticket sales going up dramatically. So there is, you see base ticket prices for major artists being higher than they have in the past compared to average wages. And you also see these maximum ticket prices. Like if you want to go see Sting or some major artist who are appealing to older, wealthier people, the top selling tickets there, the most expensive tickets, are prices that would have been unimaginable in the 1970s and 1980s. So that is one way. There's always a way to adapt. And I want to strike that now that we've gotten the doom and gloom out of the way, those people who are still left, who are interested in saying, okay, how do I make it work anyway? Because this is for me. Those are the people I want to talk to, because I would suggest that the only reason you should try to have a career in music is because you have essentially no other choice. This is what life has handed you. These are where your skills are. This is what you absolutely have to do. If you feel that way about making music for a living, then let's talk about ways to do that. If you don't feel that way about
Tatiana,
making music for a living, you've got other options.
How do you feel about that, Tatiana?
Well, I mean, I think that, obviously I'm really excited about what we've built with Tatiana Coin and with Token.fm. Not to start hawking my own thing, but it would be disingenuous for me to say, to me, when we made Tatiana Coin, what we were trying to solve was the problem between fans and connecting directly to the fans, and then funding, and we created Tatiana. Yes. Well, let me finish. And we created Tatiana Coin in order to solve those problems. But, we opened up another can of worms, because once you've created this token that you can use, you kind of need, it's almost like having a car without roads. Yeah, you can kind of get it around, but it's going to be kind of clunky. And Token.fm and Tokenly in general, they've been really responsive to what I consider to be needs that artists have. And now it's become a much more robust platform with all different kinds of features. And one of the things I told the guys the other day was, hey guys, guess what? When you need reviews, it's impossible to get them. And so I think of it as something that's, for artists, by artists. I know that there's a lot of different kinds of solutions out there. But I think that having control over your financial space, your store, and your communication as like the main hub of business is really critical, because you want to make sure that you're staying in touch with your fans. And, in terms of the idea of scarcity, which has been a problem, we've created the album token, and the album token allows you to basically bring back digital scarcity, because let's say there's only 500 Keep the Faith album tokens, they become a collector's item. And because of blockchain technology, we can verify that these are actual authentic Tatiana album tokens. And that's something that, you can share and you can sell, and you actually have ownership, which for years, there hasn't been much of an incentive to own music. Why would you own music when you could just pay $10 a month to Spotify? Well, what we figure is you could pay us less than $10 a month. Artists will get paid 20 times more than they would at a streaming platform. And now you're really letting the artist take control. And I think that, while I think that there's a place for a lot of different parts of the music industry, I don't think that a lot of them are absolutely necessary. And I think that we can maybe kind of pare down some of the administrative burden, so we can reassign those resources to places where they actually need to be used. I know,
creating art.
Yeah, exactly. Like creating art. Or even for those other companies, like a company like ASCAP or whatever performing rights organization, they don't necessarily, they want to be bringing value to their community, and they're spending a lot of extra money on like 100 million admin people that they don't necessarily need. Like, sorry, they're going to have to get a new job, but overall that's going to get a lot more money flowing to the artists, and artists don't necessarily need to participate in that if they don't want to. If they don't think that ASCAP is giving them value, then they don't necessarily need that as much anymore. I think that's kind of cool.
I think this is a wonderful product, and I don't even the product technology. It's a wonderful technology, and I really think that you are taking what blockchain does, and you're one of the first people I think really exploring what it can do for artists. I love this idea of unlocking an album, of having kind of digital voluntary, intellectual property right management, where people are opting into your system. And one of the first things I have to say is anyone who's listening to this, who's a regular listener of Tatiana, who has not bought a Tatiana coin yet, what are you doing? I own a Tatiana coin already, and I have only listened to, I think, a few episodes so far. But the first episode I was on, she gave me the pitch. I'm like, I have to buy one of these, so I did. And if you're listening to this and you haven't bought one, I don't know what's wrong with you. I mean, this is realizing the things you want to see realized in the world. Someone's out there realizing, like, if you want to see this to continue, this kind of development to continue, blockchain being put to actual use by real people to help people who are creating interesting content, who are sharing good ideas, who are spreading the kinds of messages that you want to see spread, go be the change you want to see. And you can do that in your pajamas by buying a Tatiana coin. No effort to make it from the waist down. It's amazing. So that's the first thing I want to say.
That was a very good point.
Here.
The second thing I want to get to is I want to make sure, I know we have limited time, so I want to make sure I at least get a couple of nuggets of actionable wisdom in that people can apply to their own creative life, whether it's in music or whether it's something else. So I'm just going to go for a quick spiel. I hope it'll only be a few minutes, but I kind of have a few ideas in my head that I'd like to try to share.
I like it.
One of the first things that we started to touch on initially, I think, is know your goals. And there's one goal, which is I need to make music as my sole source of income. That's going to be my primary living. That's one set of goals. And it's not the right set of goals for everyone who does music. It can be very compromising, right? In a way, the purest thing you can be as a musician is to be an amateur. And the root of that word is lover, one who loves, one who does it for the sake of love. A professional is someone who does something for money, to provide a service to others. And there's this conflict inside of every artist. How much do I want to do what is, what I love, what is unique to me, and how much do I want to consider other people and what they want from an artist and give them that? And there's this schism. It's like, how far do you go one way? How far do you go the other way? And that's a tricky thing. And for some people, it may make sense to have their goal be, I want my projects to make enough money so that I can do more projects, so I can justify going into a studio. And that could be a smaller goal. Some people might say, I just want to be an additional revenue stream. Some people say, I have a message in art that I want to reach people, and they're going to measure it on how many people they reach, not how much income they generate. If they go into debt, they might even be happy. So first, you have to know your goals and what success looks like for you. You have to define success for yourself, and being a professional musician is not the only way to have success. If you look back into history, and I think Joshua made this point when we were talking about IP, if you look back to history, you look at a painter like Rembrandt. He made roughly 50% of his living painting paintings, and the other 50% of his living teaching rich people, snot-nosed kids how to paint, right? So there are other sources. You don't necessarily have to say every penny needs to come from music or I'm a failure. You get to define success for yourself. That's the first thing that I want to say. The next thing that I want to do is give you a framework that you can think through what problems you have to solve, what things you have to address, and if we have time, we can go deeper into any of them. But I think that there are three parts of making a business out of any product. And one is the product. This is the middle part. The product is the thing that we think about the most. The album that I'm creating. How much of a balance is it between what I uniquely love and have to say, and how much does it balance towards what people in the market are demonstrating that they want to hear? So there's that balance. What's the format? Is the format an album? Is the format a string of songs? Is the format a music video? So what is the product? And I don't want to talk too much about that, because that is the one that the artist really has to decide for themselves the most. But we can talk about the two other ends, and Josh already pointed out one of them. One end is the marketing. I guess that's the final end in the chain. But the other end is the creating of that product. If you know what the product is, and let's pretend that that's fixed. I don't think it should be fixed. I think you should reconsider what the product is that you're creating. But let's pretend the product is fixed. You're saying it's a 12-song album. There are two other things you can approach. One, getting the message out about the record, the marketing, the creating a funnel of likely listeners, huge funnel of likely listeners, so that you capture some who are ready to part with money, show you that they actually value what they're doing by saying, I'll forgo other things in my life because I want this that much. That's what it means to show value. It means to give up something. And the other side that you can tweak is the creation side of it, and you can gain efficiencies there. And if you want to maximize your revenue, it really helps to have a great product. But if you have an amazing product, you've invented the best mousetrap, but it's sitting on your doorstep, no one's going to get to it. If you have a great product and you get it out in front of millions of people, but it cost you $1 billion to make, you're not going to make any profit, and you're going to go broke selling millions of units, right? So these are the two things you can optimize if you're unwilling to look at the middle. It is the creation aspect of it. What are the things that we can trim to make the creation of this cost effective? And what are the things that we can do to enhance the likelihood that people are going to buy? So those are really the three separate things that we have to look at. And if you want to dive in deeper to any one of those three things, I'm happy to go a little further. One is creating the product and getting a vision for what that product is. One is finding ways to create it more cost effectively, more cheaply, so that you have more margin. And the other is making sure that there's a greater chance of people actually finding out about it, connecting with it, and buying it. Do you want to go deeper down any of those rabbit holes?
I think the marketing one is the one that I'm most compelled by. Okay. Just because that's where I am in my cycle right now. I'm supposed to be. I'll tell you though, I've been making much more headway. Not as an artist, even though people like the music, because of the originality of the idea of what we've created. So that's been sort of surprising. As an artist, you want everybody to like only think of that part of you, because that's the most important part. But I think a lot of this other work that I've been doing has been good. But getting back to regular old marketing, you know, I found that to be very challenging as an artist. You know, you have to spend all this money on Facebook, reaching out to people, and you know, there's a lot of noise out there. So what would you say about marketing? Like, how do you stand out?
Well, the first thing I would say is that all the paid marketing is an amplification of what you're already doing. So SonicScoop now has gets about 250,000 hits a month-ish, right? When I first started writing for them, they were getting maybe 30,000 hits per month. And in that time of growing from 30,000 to, let's say, around 180 and 200,000, we spent literally nothing on advertising. There are other ways to get reach. But that said, it's ironic because one of the main products we sell is advertising. But once we reached a certain scale, we started to spend money on advertising to help reach specific goals where we had a good sense that every dollar that we spent was likely to bring us back an additional dollar of revenue. And that is really something that I think you need to like kind of moneyball at a certain point. Like, you first need to create some kind of organic traffic. Then you can amplify that through advertising. And as you're doing an amplification process, you look at, for every $100 I spend in advertising, am I getting at least $100 in revenue back off of that? So I think that's a very important thing to look at. And you know, that I think could be like a whole like hour-long thing in and of itself. But I think that's the one key takeaway just to start with, is looking at advertising as a way to amplify the organic interest you're already proving that you can generate, and then looking at it in a return kind of way. Am I spending $1 just to say, oh, 1,000 people saw this? Well, what am I actually getting back off of that 1,000 people seeing it? And how does the value of those 1,000 people coming in compare to the money I spent to get them? And that's something you really have to start to do analysis on. So that's not the place I would tell most artists to start. I mean, it might be valuable to say, hey, I can spend $1 a day and maybe I'll get some fans that way. And just the fact that I have a larger following gives me some cachet and is a worthwhile place to start. So I think that having 5,000 or 10,000 followers, a critical mass of followers, is worthwhile. How much is it going to cost to get me to that goal? And, you know, is getting to that goal somewhat artificially a valuable thing to do? That's a calculus you can make yourself that, you know, you can't put exact numbers on it, but you can at least weigh those things, the amount you're spending versus your presumed benefit.
Yeah, that's you know, the concept of the MVP, which is the minimal viable product in a startup, where you don't build the whole thing and then go and then realize the market doesn't like it. And you touched on that before. Do you think it's better for artists to release one single only?
Yes, a million thousand times.
I
Yes.
mean,
And I'm sorry to say this to Tatiana, who just put out, who just recorded 12 songs at once that she's going to put out once. But we can see, though, that she's also planning to take some of that strategy that you're suggesting and employ it, because she's not releasing the whole album at once, right? She's going to release a single and then another single, and more will be available. But for anyone who is doing it from scratch right now, so my guess is this is not going to be Tatiana's last work of music. So the one suggestion I would make for the next one, and we can go back to what you should do right now, but for the next one, what I would recommend to any artist who hasn't gotten as far along as Tatiana is now, is to say, don't start by recording 12 songs at once. It is very easy to make an argument that it should be more cost effective to do so. I don't think that's necessarily true, but I also think you can bridge all three of these things together by doing a song at a time. If you, instead of waiting 2 years and then putting out 12 songs, if you took 12 songs and focused on recording and realizing a brilliant version of one each month, and you did that for 12 months in a row, and each month your social media channels are putting out a new song, that first song, maybe only 100 people know about it. That second song, maybe 200 people do. That third song, maybe 400 people do. And by the time you're at the end of the year and there's this reason for people to keep on coming back, they see a sense of activity and vibrance coming from you. I mean, that's a fantastic way to build an album if you don't yet have an audience. To build that album, to build that audience song by song. Just like you build an audience for a podcast by podcast. You don't go and record a year's worth of podcasts at once, then release them all and say, who wants to listen to Tatiana show? You do one podcast at a time and try to snowball it. And I think that for artists who are starting out, that's the best approach. And interestingly, artists who were really successful in the 1950s and 1960s took that approach. I mean, the original record albums were literally albums. They were like photo albums with several singles inside of them. So the original record albums would be an album full, like a book full of 10 singles that the artist had released prior. Huh. The first million seller, I believe, was White Christmas by Bing Crosby, which is a collection of like Christmas singles that he had done. The earliest, releases from a lot of these major artists were folders full of 45s that they had previously released. And I think that any time a new technology hits, and any time that you're dealing with a generational change where there's a new big group of young people using a new technology, that's what they're ready for. They're not their parents. They're not interested in the 80-minute epic rock album yet. What they're interested in is an interesting stream of what's going on right now. And as that group ages, and as they become more and more comfortable with that technology, and as their attention span matures, then they want the big product from the people who they learn to trust from those earlier initial offerings of singles. I think it's almost like a rhythm that happens in culture and in the arts. And I think that's the stage we're in now. We're in a singles culture, not an album culture. And I think that that is something to adapt to.
I have a question for you. What about old recording studios? So, I managed many recording studios in New York, many that you guys have covered, in fact, all of which you've covered. I found that there was a lot of dead time in the studio. And as an artist that was in there and, trying to kind of force the owners into this idea, which they were never really that receptive to. But, that dead studio time seems like such a loss, right? And I would think that, isn't that sort of different from how the old music business used to work? Like, didn't recording studios almost function in a way as like record labels because they had all that dead time? Do you know anything about that history? I'm kind of curious.
I think that a lot of the early producers who would do artist development in and of themselves, hoping that they would develop an artist and then sell that artist to a label, were often small studio owners, or sometimes people who had an ownership interest or a relationship with a larger studio, and they'd use some of that downtime to develop artists, knowing that there was someone that they could sell that artist to. So there was absolutely a vested interest in investing in artists because they knew that someone would buy a contract with an artist that had been well developed. That is absolutely something that existed more then, and it seems to exist less now, but there are some people doing it. I think an amazing person anyone can learn a lot from is a guy who's running something called Postmodern Jukebox. I think it's one of the most interesting music systems.
Yeah, I saw them live.
There you go. Fantastic.
Yeah, here in Berlin.
Channel, right? You saw all their free stuff on their YouTube channel. They put out every week pretty much a cover of a big hit song that they do in a different style, like whether it's an old time style swing, whether they do sometimes they do like New Jack City covers of stuff. They can do all sorts of covers, mostly old.
Very talented group, yeah.
Extremely. And there's a lot of artists that are kind of being developed that way. They find an interested audience on the YouTube channel, and from there they say, we've got to get you to be part of the live show and come tour with us. And he's someone who built, a multi-million view YouTube channel by just starting small, doing ragtime renditions of modern pop songs on his little Nord keyboard in front of one camera. And getting a small recording interface, and just to keep on doing it, to do something interesting, whether it's every week or every month, whatever regular schedule you can get into of doing something interesting and giving it immediately to fans. I think that is the way that the current artistic and cultural climate works. And I think that's something you have to tap into unless you already have a huge fan base.
Right on. And I actually bought the ticket for that because my brother subscribed to his YouTube channel, and I'd never even heard of him. But he loved it that much that he said, you've got to get a ticket there in Berlin. So I did. Yeah. So it shows that even if people that aren't subscribed to the YouTube channels, the YouTube channel is like this the root of the tree that when friends tell about, going to a concert, hey, check this out. And you can quickly preview and think, wow, that's really good. I mean, YouTube is just such a liberator for artists. And it goes back to my point of, I think concerts, I mean, my mother is also a musician, full-time musician, has made all of her money doing music, and it's really been through concerts. It's always been through concerts. Album sales, yeah, at a concert you'll sell some albums at the end, hopefully, and that's really great money, but it's never through the typical channels of radio play and GEMA and all these associations that try to get money, because that to me, I see as only a very few percentage. But yeah, I think concerts are really the way to go, but sadly, it's a lot more work.
Yeah, I know.
Well, we have internet concerts, right? And now we're doing, we're going to be doing stuff with augmented reality and virtual reality and having token access in order to have those kinds of experiences.
Wow.
There's so many people that say, oh, you could just be a touring artist and touring and stuff. Well, does anybody have any idea how exhausting it is to tour? It's not very feasible.
Very hard work. It is. Absolutely. It's
and
not
it beats up your body.
And expensive.
I mean, true.
Yeah.
True. Yeah.
And it's not something that you have infinite, you don't have infinite energy. There's certain things that you can kind of cut corners with, but with your health, it's just not feasible.
Well, there's a couple of things, because I know we're running short on time. So I want to make another plug for you, Tatiana, and a recommendation. I made this recommendation to you once before. I'm going to make it again. And then I want to give just a couple tips on the marketing angle and spreading the word without advertising. So the first is my plug for you and the pitch. Josh, I went on Steemit. I didn't even know about Steemit until I found out about it through Tatiana. I went on. She had I think it was a YouTube video up there of her sitting on a bed, strumming an acoustic guitar, singing into what looked like a very fancy tube mic. And
Ari Raskin, that's his house.
Ari Raskin was recording. So he has this beautiful microphone and, this very simple backdrop. It's just a bed, Tatiana singing with an acoustic guitar. And you're not used to hearing that kind of sound quality with that kind of humble backdrop, with that kind of amazing performance, like in that context. And I was like, whoa, Tatiana's good. And she seems unusually good in this context. Like the whole context of it, simple bedroom shot with a okay looking picture, but then the sound is like that and the performance is like that. It really surprises you in the context.
Wow.
And I said, why isn't she doing one of these every single week? Like every single week, why isn't she out there putting one out?
We gotta get Ari to do it.
Well,
Tatiana, get onto it. What are you doing?
Ari's awesome like that. He likes to record music.
But you could do it with a different engineer every time. You go to a different engineer's house every time.
Absolutely.
Hey, we're going to live stream this. It'll be totally free, and I'll give you a shout out, in the credits and at the end of the video. And hey, if you want to sound great like this, go see this guy. So they'll do it for free to be part of their own calling card. They know you have an audience, or it could just be a reel builder for them. So there are ways to cross-pollinate and cross-promote. And that's the other thing I want to get to. For when you're first starting, I think there are two major ways that a lot of people neglect to build their audience. And one is to cross-pollinate and cross-promote with other artists. And this can be music artists. The obvious thing is, hey, let's play a show together. Your fans will hear me, my fans will hear you. That's the obvious one. Hey, I'm going to shout out a track that my friends put out, and I know they'll shout out my track when it comes out. So cross-pollinating with other music artists, cross-pollinating audiences, huge thing.
Yes. YouTube artists do that all the time. They grab one star will contact another YouTube channel and say, hey, let's do a show together, and then the subscribers from that channel, they cross-pollinate.
It's huge. But why can't you also do that with audio engineers? Like I just brainstormed that example for you. It's a way to do it. Yep. But another way to do it is with, what if there's sculptors or painters or videographers? There may be other people who aren't even in music that you can cross-pollinate audiences with. So that's a major thing in marketing. Cross-pollinating audiences. There are audiences out there you can both share and build. And we
have that feature, by the way.
That's nice.
Yeah, we're making it so you can have Justin Coin and Tatiana Coin and Josh Coin, and then we could do bundled releases and also discounts together and stuff. If you use Tatiana on Justin's stuff. So I think that's kind of neat.
That's wonderful, and you can almost do almost like an affiliate kind of thing, where if you have email lists, I still think are great for driving sales for artists. It's the most direct form of communication. I've got to tell you, it's amazing, at least for us with selling our products. Email sales have been way better than Facebook sales and anything else. The direct email. It's like intimate. If someone is actually regularly opening your emails and they look forward to reading your email every week and they look forward to what's in it, it's a more intimate connection and a connection that I think is more likely to lead to a sale, at least in most of the general marketing metrics I've seen, and at least in my own experience of running our own site and selling our own.
I just noticed ever since Gmail put out, the tabs of promotion and social and everything,
Yes.
it gets filtered automatically. And I mean, I do it as well. I don't check it.
But ours don't. Here's the thing, SonicScoop, we have insanely high open rates, something like 35% of people who are on our list open our emails. And for people who don't know email marketing, that might seem low, only 30%, but that's like insanely high.
It is high.
Yeah. But because there are ways, and you've got to study them, but there are ways to A, not get caught in those filters, and B, I think that's a big thing. I mean, give them content that you don't want, that they clearly want, and then in addition, know the tricks to stay out of those.
But I think you're tapping on a problem that I see in the music industry, and it's always been in there. In fact, for any artist, is that you're becoming an artist, and then you have to be a marketer, you have to be a printer, you have to be a designer, you have to be a touring bus organizer, you have to be, you have to be everything. And so like the notion of specialization goes out the door, because you can't afford someone that specializes in marketing, because you're right, there's so many tricks. How do you go around the filter? Maybe you need to study for, a whole while to learn all the little tricks, and you'll never learn all of them. And
that's
takes time away from the art.
I agree.
You're right. But that's how startup and entrepreneurship works. It's just how it works, unless you come with extreme funding. That's just how it works. But as you start to develop a revenue stream by doing what you do, then you can have people take over those things for you. And that's what I've done with SonicScoop. I mean, we grew it to a certain size, and there's certain things that I did okay, but I get to hand off those things that I was just okay at to other people, and pay them a rate, so that I can focus on the things where really I can add maximum value. And if the place where you can add maximum value is in writing songs and performing them, then yes, as quickly as is reasonably possible, you want to hand off those tasks so that you can focus on the thing that you can be exceptional at. But that doesn't mean that if you're starting up bootstrapping, that you get to complain that, there's all this stuff I have to know. Yes. Can I curse? Can I curse?
Suck it up.
Fucking deal with it.
Suck it up.
Yes, you have to. That's what it means to be an entrepreneur starting up a business, and it means that even if you're an artist, there's no special magical I'm an artist shield to reality that you can put up.
No,
more reality,
and I saw this with
about it or deal with it.
I definitely saw this with my mum. She always treated her music as a total business. She was always focused, and it was a startup. It was a startup. That's what it was. And building my own startup with Voltoro, you really see you do have to put on a lot of different hats, and it's a hell of a lot of work. Mm-hmm. But you're right. That's a really good way of putting it. That you have to be treating it like a startup.
Yes.
Musicians, the original entrepreneurs, we have to do it.
It's the world's second oldest.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's true.
No, I don't know if you can make that claim.
One last little quick thing, just because I wanted to give some more practical marketing advice before we leave, is that I think making legitimate, honest connections with people who can help promote and spread the word about your work is important. But the key to that, and unfortunately it's a little late in the game for this particular release, maybe, but maybe not. The important thing here is to form those relationships before you need them. I know this because me, as a person who has a platform where I can put something out, when someone says, hey, I just stumbled across your thing, will you give my thing attention? If it's really, really interesting, I will give it attention. Yeah. I mean, if someone sends me something really interesting, they say, hey, I've never met you before, but here's a thing that we're doing. It's really interesting. It's a perfect fit for your readers. And it is exciting. But that really happens 1 out of 1,000 times, right? Then there are people who take a different approach. And they reach out to me and say, I really like what you're doing. I like this about it, and this about it. And here's something that's interesting. It has nothing to do with me that may help you. Maybe you want to do a story about these guys. It seems like it'd be right up your alley. Or have you ever seen this? It seems to add some additional context to a question that you raised. And they reach out to me in advance, and they're just being like helpful or nice. And then later down the line, they say, hey, by the way, I'm going to be launching this thing in a while. And that relationship is already there. And I know that they're interested in me, and I know how reciprocity works. Like, I'm just going to be biased in favor of them. And as rational as I try to be, I cannot help but be biased in favor of them. Now, it doesn't mean if what they're doing is really uninteresting or just not a good fit for our audience, then I'm going to give them exposure. Like, you don't want to be corrupt. But it does help bias people in favor of you if you're starting relationships with them before you need the relationship.
Absolutely. Give first, folks. Give first and you'll receive. And it's really, that's the motto of Techstars. You know, and I think it goes back to startups again. Give first, and it's amazing. If you give and give and give, people will do stuff back for you, and you don't need to expect it because it just will happen.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tatiana.
It also puts you in the mindset. I'm sorry to just jump off that, but it also puts you in the mindset of creating value for other people. So that when you go to create a product, it's much more likely to actually be a product that's interesting to other people, that other people are going to want to help promote, because you've put yourself in the mindset of, hey, how do I provide value for other people, even in your day-to-day interactions with them? And that inevitably seeps into your work and makes it more likely that your work is going to be shareable by these other people too. So it's just like a virtuous cycle.
Hey, Tatiana.
Yes, my dears. We have to go, guys. We've been on the show for over an hour. We've had some really good guests in general lately. I've been pretty pleased.
Fantastic.
That's because you had me twice. That's why.
See, I like the honesty here. But you know, this has been super fun. I will certainly have you back on again, Justin. And we're gonna hang up at PorkFest, so that's gonna be fun. Josh, are we gonna get you? Actually, I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to PorkFest, but I'm pretty sure I usually go. Josh, are you going?
I'd love to. I've wanted to go for about 6 years.
All right. Well, before the Bonanza in Berlin in in the fall, late summer, early fall, maybe we'll all meet up in America. Thanks, Justin, for being on the show. Thanks, Kevin. Looking forward to seeing you at CannaMed event. You guys can go to medicalgenomics.com. And then, Justin, where can people find you? On SonicScoop.com, right?
SonicScoop.com is the best thing. You can also get me at justincolletti.com, but SonicScoop.com is where I am the most active putting stuff out.
Very good. All right, everybody, buy your Tatiana coins. Buy your Keep the Faith album. It's basically going to melt your face off with awesomeness. Go to Voltoro, buy some gold because, Bitcoin, gold, those are two really great stores of value.
Trade them. If Bitcoin's going down, you buy into gold. Never go back to fiat, folks. Screw that fiat stuff.
All right. I think we've made our imprint on the world. Bye, everybody. Thank you.